Right, Land Rover Defender, TD5 specifically for this one, and these are the rear stub axles. The front stub axles are very similar to this, but a little bit more involved. Right, so loosening the road wheel nuts first of all, before I come to jack it up. Just makes it easier to do whilst it's on the deck. Right, fairly straightforward to do this one. Most of the gear that you take off, and there's a fair bit to take off to get to the actual stub axle, but most of it is fairly straightforward and shouldn't be corroded on too badly. The worst ones are going to be the bolts for the disc calipers. The rest of it's pretty large scale bolts, so quite easy to get off with a bit of work. Now I'm actually loosening off these bolts for the half shafts. Just makes it easier when you come to loosen them later on, because they can be on quite tight. So whilst the wheel's on the floor, you don't have to have someone pressing the brake to hold everything in place. So I'm just loosening them all off first of all. 17mm spanner, straightforward enough. Right, word of warning for the half shaft: when you withdraw this, it's fairly long. It depends which side of the vehicle you do. One is longer than the other. Just make sure you do have enough room to withdraw it. Do not be close up to a wall or a fence or something like that, because you're not going to be able to get the half shaft out and you're going to be hung out to dry with it. So just be warned. I'm not going to tell you how to jack your vehicles up. Hopefully you should all know how to do that safely already. Right, so safely and securely jacked up. Let's get these bolts out. I'll speed it up. You don't want to be seeing me messing about with these. We want to get on with the job. All bolts off and wheel safely removed. .13mm spanner, and this is where it might get a little bit vague, because these are new bolts that I've put in because I refurbed the brakes on this, and then I had to take it apart again, which is quite depressing. So I actually ended up using Imperial on these. It's somewhere between a 12 and a 13. I think I ended up using a bashed on 12, depends how corroded they are. I would recommend renewing these for the sake of how much they cost. Again, it's something that does take a lot of wear and tear down there, and they are badly corroded. These are proven to be quite tight because they are Loctited in. Securely move those. Brand new, only been in a day, and out they come again. Next up, I'm just, because I had new brake pads in, I'm just using this tool to push the brake pads back out, so that when I come to put it back on, it's easier. And it should also be easier to come off. Slide it up and we'll tie that up securely out of the way, making sure you do not bend those copper pipes. Right, back to the half shaft, 17mm, and we will continue to take these off. Nothing untoward with these. Once you've got them loosened off, straight out, not a problem. Right, let's speed things up a little bit. I don't work at this speed usually. Let's save some time. Pretty straightforward. And sometimes you can withdraw the half shaft straight away, but this time it's going to need a little bit of light persuasion. A rubber or a wooden mallet would probably be better, just to loosen it. Do not lather into it with all your might, just keep tapping it and eventually it will break free from the seal. And this is why you need the clearance to withdraw the half shaft. just inspecting it as I bring it out. It does have a gasket on there which we'll renew later on. It's important to put this somewhere where you can keep it clean. You don't want any dirt or grit getting into it. Next up, the hub nut. It's a 52mm. This is a box spanner, and one of the reasons I could not get mine up to the correct torque settings is because this has no adapter for a torque wrench, so I had to guess it, and I'm guessing that's why these bearings are damaged. They can be quite tight, depends who put them on last, and you could be faced with different setups. This is one nut and then a washer or a thrust washer, and then it's the bearing. I would renew these nuts regardless of how old they are, how damaged. And there you go, nut off. And I'm going to hold the center of the hub so the bearing doesn't fall out, and withdraw the actual hub, and we're good to go. It's off. Right, Defender TD5 stub axle replacement. To get to this point, it's a case of road wheel off, brake caliper off, and the hub off, and you'll see that in previous videos. I'm just cleaning all the stuff up here to ensure I get a good connection with the socket, and I'm using a 11/16. Yes, 11/16. Tried a 16 and that was too small. Tried a 17, that was too big naturally. Now these are on pretty tight, as you can see here, and they are going to require some effort to get them off. Do not go hell for leather on these. I am using an extension bar on this, and I would suggest cracking them all off first of all, just to make sure that you can get this off, because if you get one stuck in, you're going to be in trouble. So here we go, going around cracking them off. And I had painted this previous before I decided to do a change in it. I realised the bearing was shot, and you can see scorch marks on this stub axle. I think I could have refurbed this, but this is a original stub axle, so, and it's been on the vehicle as long as I've had it, so it was a case of bite the bullet and renew it. As you can see with these, I am working pretty hard to get these things off, and do not keep unscrewing them. At some point turn them back in, because they do get corroded on the threads, and as you're drawing them out it just brings all the corrosion out. So I do back them out and then I drive them back in. I continue doing this for quite some time, I've got to say, but it's worth taking your time. You do not want to snap these. They are quite a large size bolt, so you shouldn't really snap them. But you can feel the heat building up in them. There is a lot of resistance on these. Some came off easier than others. And you can see how hard I am working these. And that's a 1/2 inch ratchet. This one's looking good to come out finally. Nope, sticking again. Another clean up, why not? This actual socket was slipping a little bit, and here I am cranking them back in, and this did help a huge amount. So finally, here comes the lubrication. Things aren't going that well as regards them coming out, but you can access these from the back side as well, and that's half the problem. It's dragging the rust in from the far side of these. I've got a bit of a gap going with all of them, so a bit of lubrication to them, WD-40, something like that. The longer you can leave it, the better. let it work its magic, and again just keep working these bolts, and finally you will win over them. Right, let's speed things up. I continue in the same manner for quite some time. All lubrication on them, and again just working these bolts pretty hard to get them out. And finally we're almost done. Some oil will drop out when you take this stub axle off, so just have something handy to catch some. It's not a lot comes out, but just be warned that some will drip down, and you want to retain that sealing plate. You should renew it really, but I forgot to order mine and I'll have to reuse it again. And there we go, one stub axle. Quick clean up, and I would put something in there to prevent any contamination. I just done the oil on the differentials, so I'm looking to protect that. Again, that gasket needs to come off as well and needs to be cleaned up. So that's the old one off. It doesn't look that bad. It is carrying a few scorch marks on it, and that was the reason I was changing it. I'm going to take this opportunity to clean up the flange. I'll get the old gasket off, try not to score it, and again I'm going to run the tap down just to clean out the old Loctite and any rust debris. So the bearings that come with the kit are slightly different from the ones that come off. It has a metal insert, and as you'll see, this is the old one, no metal insert. But you can tell which way around they go because the lip goes towards where the oil comes from, so that points up. And after looking at the bottom of this one, I could tell which way around it went, which is the metal stands on the outside. And this needs to be seated, a bit of lubrication on the outside, and actually use the old seal to drift it in, and that did not work that well. Too much flex in it, and you'll see I do resort to a 32mm socket if I can recall, but at least this did get it started and located. And there's the socket. A couple of bashes with this and it was seated quite easily, and you just knock it all the way down. You can't get this one wrong. There is a shoulder that it sits on, a few taps, and that is seated pretty nicely. Again, try to keep all these surfaces clean. The cleaner you can keep them, the better the seal you can get. That goes without saying. Next up, we're taking out our protected paper, another clean up, keeping all the grit out. New gasket can only go on one way, it's equal all the way on the rear. Some people grease these up, but to be honest, you can keep them in the correct place. A couple of bolts in there to hold them in, and now these are going to be new bolts. This is the shield. Again, I should have really renewed that, but I ran out of time to order it. It's not that bad, that one, to be honest. These are new bolts. You may as well put new ones in with things like this, because the next time you see it, it'll probably be another 15 years, hopefully. Again, watch your gasket. Try and get as many of these bolts in as possible to get that gasket located. No spanner in yet, all fingers and thumbs. And these are going to need to be torqued up as well. So these replacement bolts did come with Loctite already on them. Again, I'm getting them all in. I'm going to then spanner them on just to nip everything down a little bit. Not too tight at the moment because we're going to torque these down later on. Again, just tighten them evenly, going opposite to opposite. And it brings the stub axle nicely into place and keeps the gasket evenly placed. And then we're going to break out the torque wrench. I'm going to torque these up to 65 Newton meters or 48 pounds per foot. And you'll see the method in which I tighten them up opposite to opposite. And then come to the next one round, and here's opposite one again. And that's the benefit of working with the newer bolts. Everything's so much cleaner to work with. There's no point putting old stuff back on. That's final one done. Off with the protective cover. Make sure everything's clean, and back on with the hub. Back on with all of the hub accessories, the bearing, the thrust washer, the thin nut, the locking washer, and then the lock nut. You need to make sure these are all seated correctly. If you take your hub off, then you need to make sure you renew your oil seal on the hub, because they do wear, and if you put in a old oil seal onto a new stub axle, you're probably going to have problems. So here we go. Once I've got that hub on, as on a previous video, this is just clarifying it for the state of the stub axles. Next we're going to torque this up. The lock nut. A worthwhile investment to having the 52mm spanner rather than the box spanner. And now we're just going to bend over the tab washer on both sides, one bending up, one bending down. Quick clean up of the gaskets again. Every time you take these things off, you need to clean everything up to make sure they marry up together properly. The gaskets need to be new and clean. All the holes need to be cleaned out. In with the half shaft with its new gasket yet again. A little bit of jiggling about. It's mainly lifting it because it goes in and it drags on the bottom. Just lift that half shaft up a little bit and it will seat. Do not force this in at all. You can feel it going into the splines. And then we can tighten these nuts down with a new gasket and then torque them up in an even pattern to 65 Newton meters, which is 48 pounds per foot. And it's all looking pretty good so far for the stub axle replacement. Looks pretty good. Back on with the brake calipers. Use new bolts on these. They do have a thread lock on them. This is one item I will always renew the bolts on these. Just makes it easier to get them off next time. Almost done. Get the wheel nuts on and get the wheel pulled on so it's at least square. These bigger wheels can cause a bit of trouble lining them up now and then. Drop it down, clear it all out, and tighten these wheel nuts up fully. you are meant to torque them up, but common sense should prevail on these. And the final one, which has the security bolt on, and that's it, job done. Stub axle.